UFC 5 has the biggest roster of any UFC game, but I still want more. I don't mean active fighters, I'm talking about fighters from past UFC games who I think could still hold up or be valid additions to UFC 6. I've picked a dozen or so pioneers, legends, and cult favourites that we need back in UFC gaming. Sergio Pettis. Former Bellator bantamweight champion, Sergio signed with the UFC at 20, has a win over Brandon Moreno, has some crazy highlight reel KOs. What's not to like about having him in both flyweight and bantamweight? Cairo Parisian. One of the original pioneers of judo in MMA, Cairo has a win over Matt Serra and Nick Diaz in the UFC. It would be cool to pay tribute to one of the OGs the old school fans would remember. Dong Hyun Kim, the first Korean fighter to win in the UFC. Now we see a lot of spinning elbows, but he was the first to ever win via spinning elbow KO, never won a title, made history regardless. Thiago Santos, former title challenger, known for going 5 rounds with an injured knee against John Jones. Moretta was a KO machine, won 7 performance and fight of the night bonuses, wins over Anthony Smith, Jack Manson, Jan Blachowicz, Johnny Walker, they still hold up. Roy Nelson, big country, has a cult fan base, won the Ultimate Fighter, is a KO of the Year winner. This would be a cool throwback. Brock Lesnar, he was one of the biggest cuts from UFC 4, one of the most sought after fighters to be added back. We got to see him return in UFC 6. Francis Ngannou, another one of the biggest cuts from UFC 4. Another former heavyweight champion. It felt wrong not having Francis in UFC 5. We need him back. Mirko Krokop. What fighting game is complete without one of the OG GOATs of MMA? He's another highly sought after addition. Takanori Gomi. How do they keep dropping Pride alter egos and not adding this guy? The Fireball Kid for all the Pride fans. Imagine UFC 6, Pride ring, and being able to recreate his fight with Nick Diaz. Brendan Schaub. It would be funny having the former fighter, comedian, and podcaster Brendan Schaub as a playable fighter. Yoel Romero, another one of the biggest cuts from UFC 4. Being able to do Yoel versus Hamzat or Yoel versus Pereira would be epic. Gegard Mousasi. Like Yoel, he's one of the best fighters to never be champion. He flew under the radar but was one of the best middleweights at the time. Kazushi Sakuraba, another fighter who should have been added in the Pride alter ego drops by now. What UFC game could be complete without a UFC Hall of Famer and MMA pioneer? Benson Henderson, one of the best lightweights no one talks about anymore. He should have an alter ego in UFC 5. We should be able to run him versus Pettis. OG fans would agree. Rory McDonald, another fighter that should have an alter ego in UFC 5. We should be able to recreate his epic fight with Robbie Lawler. Besides that, he was one of the best welterweights of his era, defeated Tyron Woodley, he went on to be champion, and also needs an alter ego. Mark Hunt. I don't care about the narrative, UFC isn't going to add him, forget about that. Think about how epic the Super Samoan alter ego would be. King of the walk-off KO, more power than Derek Lewis. Bigfoot Silva. Let's get him in there to recreate his widely regarded best heavyweight fight of all time with Mark Hunt. Frank Mir. He's a legendary figure, 15-year UFC career, 2 heavyweight title runs. He holds the record for most wins, most finishes, and most submissions in heavyweight history for all the submission heads and OG fans. And I saved the best for last, CM Punk, because you got to be able to see if your friend who smashes you in the game every time can do it with CM Punk. That's why we need him. The common sentiment with a few of these fighters is they can't be added due to having heat with UFC brass. They say UFC is becoming pro wrestling. There's a saying in pro wrestling, never say never. If Bret Hart can return to the WWE after the Montreal Screwjob, it's not impossible guys like Mark Hunt, Brendan Schaub, and Frank Mir can't appear in future UFC games. Maybe if fans bombarded Dana to add them, like they told him they want to oil him up, we could make things happen. When UFC 6 comes out, I think they're going to have Pride mode, because everyone complained and complained. Collectively, we the fans have more power than we think. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I hope to see you in the next one. Drop a like and subscribe. Peace.